Throughout the modern era, most NBA teams, when they're making their long playoff push and they have their established players, they usually make their runs from 4 to 7 years. And when I say modern era, I'm talking about Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, all the way up until present day. But we always seen these teams have a 4 to 7 year stretch where they make their runs year in, year out, deep playoff runs, and they're trying to make championship pushes. And I believe the longest stretch we've seen was from Tim Duncan and the Spurs. But if I'm wrong about that, you guys correct me on that. With the new upcoming CBA, this everyday occurrence with teams on this type of level will be put to the test. And we're going to see many duos throughout the league, even the guys that are up and coming like Desmond Bane and Ja Morant. We're going to see those duos have a much narrower window to make their championship run. And that's because with the new CBA, once guys qualify to make a certain percentage of the cap, whether that be 35% or less, with these max deals, which fluctuate up and down depending on the player's circumstance, how often they make all NBA. But once you have two players that are kind of almost touching the super max threshold of 35% of the cap, it becomes difficult to put solid players around these duos. Because now going forward with the new CBA in 2024-2025 season, teams that start to go over the cap by 17 million from back-to-back seasons, I believe 2 out of 4 years, they start to get punished. So them actually maintaining their teams from year in, year out become much more difficult. Their first round picks end up going at the end of the first round automatically if they're over the cap by 17 million for 2 years in a row. Or if they're over the cap by 17 million for 2 out of 4 years. And that's not even the worst of it. If they stay over the cap, they're limited on using mid-level exceptions, whether to pick up players or for trades. Same thing for their first round picks. They're limited on how many first round picks they can get or send out in trades. And most importantly, they're limited to the type of contracts that they can trade for. So if they have a supermax player, things are not working out, they can only trade him for another supermax player until they get under that $182 million threshold. So a lot of teams right now, present day, are going to be put to the test with this going forward from season to season. The Celtics with Jason Tatum and Brown, the Bucks, the Suns, Grizzlies, Nuggets, Clippers, and to somewhat degree the Lakers, but most definitely the Mavs. As the Mavericks move along, they're going to try to put pieces around Kyrie and Luka, and things might get a little tricky because they're going to have to dip in and out of being over that luxury tax line of $182 million. Now, for those of you that are watching the video version of this, as you can see here, the Milwaukee Bucks, these guys are pretty much going to be over the tax threshold for a good minute. And when you particularly have players that are hitting about 35% of the team's cap, guys like Giannis, Damian Lillard, just having one of those guys on your roster, things tend to get a little tricky on how to build a competitive team around these guys. We've seen Portland struggle with this with Damian Lillard making about 35% of the cap when he was out there. Portland, from year in, year out, they were a really expensive team. And it got to the point that it became harder for them to maneuver and find players to put around Dame. And they were battling to get into the play-in year in, year out. But yet they were one of the most expensive NBA teams. As you can see, the Bucks are very close to that threshold line of hitting about $182 million. They recently re-signed a couple of key guys like Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez. But from year in, year out, they're going to be mostly signing minimum role players just to stay away from that $182 million second apron tax. So they're very front heavy with the starters and their salaries. But once again, if an injury happens to one of their key guys, like Brook Lopez, he's getting older, it's going to be very hard for them to finesse and kind of find a guy to fit in there without going over that cap. And that's when all those penalties start kicking in once you hit over $182 million. Now, the Boston Celtics are a team that everyone's looking at to see how they're going to maintain this squad with both Jason Tatum and Brown making all that money, especially when Tatum next season is eligible for his extension. As you can see, this season they're still under the second apron tax. They hit the first apron, but mainly with the new CBA, all the penalties really kick in with that second apron. they kind of lock you in to the players that you have. They make it hard for you to acquire new pieces around the players and move guys around that are not working out. So the Celtics for next season and the season after, depending on what role players they want to put around Tatum and Brown, they're always going to be close to hitting the threshold of $182 million. So the fact that teams are going to have to go in and out of the second apron like that, it's going to leave that window of guys making their championships run smaller and smaller. Not only the money and the books have to balance perfect, but things on the court have to be perfect also. Guys got to be healthy. Guys got to be clicking on all cylinders and maximizing their time together while they still have it on the court, because you never know. Maybe they might put a good role player around Jason Tatum and Brown for one season, and then he's eligible to get more money the next. And of course, they're not trying to dip into the second apron tax and get penalized with their draft picks and limited roster moves. Now, one team in particular that's going to be in that luxury tax, it's almost a guarantee, is the Phoenix Suns. They're pretty much all in. So Bradley Beal gets hurt, Kevin Durant gets hurt. When I say get hurt, I'm talking about having a season-ending injury that takes about a year and a half to recover. They're pretty much stuck. And if they want to trade one of these guys away, they can only trade a guy making a similar salary. So from year in, year out, this team is going to be getting minimum contract role players that are looking to get a ring, or they're going to have to go the development route. They're going to have to dig deep with their scouts, get good second-round picks, get good late first-round picks, because for this team, it's going to be all about now, because going ahead to the future, 7 years out, all their first-round draft picks are going to move to the end of the first round, because this team is going to be over that $182 million second apron. So if Kevin Durant doesn't bring home a championship, along with Bradley Beal and Booker, this is going to be a major fail, not only currently, but also in the future. Now, the Memphis Grizzlies are an upcoming team with the duo Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, but next season, Desmond Bane's new contract will kick in, and between him and Ja Morant off rip, their salaries almost equate to $80 million. And when you factor that in with some of their key guys like Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., if they get a couple of role players, those numbers tend to add up quick. So not only the roster selection with the role players have to be perfect, but these guys are going to have to be utilizing that time frame of just having everyone together. They're going to have to maximize that to the fullest. But with the Grizzlies, they're a small market team. I don't expect them to dip into the second apron. But potentially this team, they probably will end up going the route is dipping into second apron for one season and then making sure that they're out of it going forward until 3 seasons later that they could dip right back into it. So that way they don't get penalized on their draft picks. But any season that they dip into that second apron, they are limited for that season as far as mid-level exception trades, matching salaries. They can't group guys together and try to match a salary. It's only same salary coming in, same salary going out. And this will be very interesting to see how the small markets maneuver around this new CBA, especially teams like Memphis and Denver. Even though Denver is kind of a semi-small market, but it'll be very interesting to see how they maneuver, because these teams don't necessarily have owners that are willing to dip into the tax, because their local TV deals are not going to justify that. And speaking of Denver, the duo of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, that's going to be interesting to see how they keep those two together. And if Michael Porter Jr., the salary that they give him, is his play on the court going to justify it? Because if he doesn't have the output that they think he's going to have, he's going to put this team close to that second apron from year in and year out. And we definitely seen the Nuggets already kind of pre-planning to avoid certain tax implications with the loss of Jeff Green and Bruce Brown. So teams definitely have already started making pivots, making sure that they stay away from that second apron of $182 million. Now, the Clippers are a team that have been currently over that cap for quite some time, but by the time the new CBA kicks in, they're going to have a lot of guys, especially their role players, out of this roster or just free agents. So they kind of escape that, especially going into that brand new stadium. I'm not sure if Steve Ballmer wants to flip the bill on a luxury tax and also deal with this team not having the output that he expected, which his team was already projected to win a championship in 2020. And just everything kind of been downhill ever since because of injuries. But when you have injury-riddled guys like that, especially with this new CBA, you are not going to want to lock those guys to high numbers where if you're over that cap, you're going to be pretty much stuck with those guys. So Steve Ballmer going forward, he might actually make sure that they're under that second apron just in case guys like Kawhi and PG are kind of immobile. That way he'll have enough flexibility to get out of those contracts through trades. But if the Clippers re-sign Kawhi and Paul George and they're over that $182 million luxury tax threshold, and then these guys end up getting injured, they're just going to be stuck going forward. And not only that, year in, year out, their first round draft pick 7 years from then is going to be moved automatically to the end of the first round. So next season, if they re-sign Kawhi and Paul George and they keep getting injured in 2026, 2027, 28, 29, all those first round picks 7 years out from each of those years are going to be at the end of the first round. So, but Steve Ballmer, it'll be very interesting to see how he negotiates these brand new deals. But with the league rest rules in play, he might actually have an upper hand with these guys being on the court. And the Dallas Mavericks with Luka, oh man, they better make sure that their books are right, because if Dallas is stuck with a shitty team, Luka's going to give them hell. That guy does not like losing, especially when he has Kyrie on this team. Who knows what Kyrie's going to do from time in, time out, but they definitely don't want to be stuck in a luxury tax hellhole with these guys going back and forth from year in, year out, losing draft picks. I mean, Kyrie just signed an extension, but Dallas has done a good job with staying under that tax threshold going forward. But they are going to have to continue signing role players, and they're going to have to be very, very particular, as they still have guys on the books like Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Keebler. But when these guys' contracts are up, if they need a slight bump, it will push them closer to that threshold. But development is going to be major for a lot of these teams that have these high salary guys on there making about 35% of the cap. Development is going to be a very key thing for these guys to kind of skate being stuck in a luxury tax hellhole. It's almost like these teams in a way have to operate how the Lakers have been operating the past few seasons. Even though they got LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the books, they seem to have gone with the development of some younger guys and just trying to find gems that kind of fit to their team. But the Lakers, if they could find maybe like a nice 3-and-D guy that can make about $20 million, that'll actually put them above the tax threshold in that second apron. So right now they're kind of stuck in the middle ground where they can only really afford, well, not afford, but they're only willing to sign guys around the $15 to about $11 million range. So this is the conundrum a lot of duels are going to have, is that once two guys are making 35% of the cap, their teams are going to have to be really selective on who they get, and their development is really going to have to be keen. But mainly for the first time, a lot of these duels, their championship windows, much more narrow than before.